Welcome to another Gaspesian Better Living Chat. These are a series of conversations and topics that we hope will inspire, encourage, and support us all to be well here at home on the Gaspe Coast. They're short conversations about learning new things, discovering, participating, experiencing, and enjoying things. And we also get to meet some very interesting people. Today's topic is about gardening. Now, for anybody that knows me, they know that I love gardening. I think it's one of the ways that I really enjoy my summer. And gardening is good for us in so many ways. We get fresh air, sunshine, exercise. It changes our mind. We get to have good food from it, spend time with family, and it's fun. And all we have to do to enjoy it is get our hands a little bit dirty. Today, I've asked Greg Leblanc to join me in a conversation. Greg is from Fredericton, New Brunswick, if I'm not mistaken, and he now lives in Carleton. And I met Greg a few years ago, and one of the things that we talked about was our gardens. And I thought it was great that he had this big garden, and I knew he grew a lot of potatoes and all that. So I thought, what better person to start off our gardening talks than with Greg? So Greg, welcome to our chat. And can you start us off and tell us a little bit about yourself?
Sure, I'd be happy to. Well, first of all, thank you, Mary, for starting this great initiative. I think it's a great way to reach out to people on a variety of subjects. So just cahoots to you. So about me, I am from Fredericton, New Brunswick, or I grew up just outside the capital city, and grew up in the countryside with my grandparents, even my great grandparents close by. We're Acadians, and so farming is in our roots. So I grew up close by an apple orchard, maple sugary bush, some big gardens, those kinds of things. And so I was exposed to it very early on and appreciated the value of putting my hands in the earth, eating fresh vegetables, and joining in on the multi-generational experience that gardening was for me. So I continued that on after I left my family and had my own apartments or houses. I brought my garden with me, and so it's been part of my life experience since then.
And why do you like gardening? So you grew up with it, but why did you continue to enjoy it there now as an adult? Like, why do you like it?
Well, there's so many reasons, and you mentioned a lot of them, that gets me out in the fresh air and sunshine, keeps me active. I'm a real foodie, so I really like cooking fresh food, especially, and it's part of my life to feel that, the experience, the pride, the joy of planting a seed, seeing it grow, looking after it in the garden, harvesting it in the fall, making fresh food with it, salads or other things that I cook, putting in the freezer or otherwise so that I can enjoy its benefits all year long. So I get a lot of enjoyment out of all those aspects and a sense of well-being. And also another aspect of me is around sustainable development, protection of the environment, resiliency. Gardening for me is a good place to realize that, to take control over aspects of my life, rather than going to the grocery store and seeing that a carrot was grown in Israel or an apple was grown in Chile, and I have to buy that because it's pretty much the only option. Well, I know that what I keep in my cold room or what I pull out of the ground, it couldn't be closer, it couldn't be fresher. And I know my own practices in growing that food. So this winter, when we went through the whole COVID situation and people were panicking, going to the grocery store and buying everything that they could, I didn't worry so much because I knew that I still had potatoes and onions and carrots in my cold room, and canned goods and stuff in my freezer. So it lowered my stress a lot as well. So, those are all aspects that I really enjoy around gardening, and that's why I've got a passion for it, and I encourage other people to take it on, or to help them out. And I'm part of, a network of other people in the Bay here that are all equally passionate, have their own techniques and whatnot around it. And recently there was an effort around something more, another approach. It's a little bit deeper, called permaculture. And we took some workshops together, a group of people and myself, and learned, exchanged, shared our passions that way too. And so all of those things have really allowed that aspect of me to flourish over the years, and also brought me closer to people that I have common values with and become my friends. So there's a huge amount of benefits from gardening for me.
And Greg, I know that you have a son. Your son, how old is your son?
He's turning 5 this summer.
Okay, so do you get to spend some time in the garden with him as well?
Oh, yeah, for sure. It's part of, he gets to tag along, Sometimes he's just there with his little truck, and he's digging a pathway for me when I'm planting potatoes. Or other times he's like helping harvest. He sees the benefits of it. We've got some chickens on land too. So he helps me pick up the eggs in the morning, or get food for them, that kinds of stuff. So he's taken an interest just because he's tagging along. And he knows that when we make an omelet in the morning, that it comes from the chickens that he knows. So he gets a lot of enjoyment out of it as well, and seeing all that happen before his eyes. And I think that it's going to be a part of the rest of his life in a lot of ways. So I'm really proud to be able to give that to him as a bit of a legacy. So he's adapted. It's adapted to his level. Sometimes I found a worm in the garden when I'm harvesting or whatever, and he runs over to the chickens with it, and like just laughs about that. So it's a real family activity for us here. Yeah.
Very nice. Just okay. So what do you plan on growing this summer?
Well, the staples, onions, garlic, potatoes, let's see, what else? Lots of herbs, tomatoes, beans, peas, a variety of stuff. We've also got things like raspberries, blackberries, that grow on our land, a variety of different stuff. I've even got a few apple trees that are kind of like grown wild that I've pruned over the years that are close by. So in the fall, I'm expecting usually a pretty good harvest for making applesauce and that kinds of stuff. So it's not just what happens in the garden. I think that's fun, but there's also other resources around that I can tap into. Fiddlehead picking is coming up. I'm really
Yes.
looking excited to that. So, I don't look at as gardening as the only aspect. There's stuff in the wild, mushrooms, and whatnot. Anything that it involves food in some way, maple syrup, whatever. I find it really fun and interesting, and it's a great way to connect with people or just to be in nature as well. So it's all that is really interesting for me. But the garden is a good place for people just to grow their favorite stuff. What do you buy at the grocery store? What do you enjoy eating the most? Think of those things, and that's probably what you're going to want to pick. And yeah, you can start things early in the household. But there's lots of things that you plant just directly in the ground, so you can do that mid-June, like peas and beans, whatnot, that grow best that way, actually. So it's never really too late to think about that. And you can grow it in a pot. You can dig up the earth, whatever is most adapted to your situation. Even if you're an elder in a home, well, maybe you've got a balcony or a window that you can just put a tomato plant next to. So it can be really adapted to anybody's abilities, interests, and tastes.
And if somebody was starting out and they've never gardened before, they're hearing you talk
Yep.
and they're saying, I want to grow something, but what's the easiest thing to grow?
Well, usually, a tomato plant in a pot is a good start if you like tomatoes, because it's something that you can see grow pretty quickly. As long they require some water and sunshine, and a bit of dirt. And after that, they look after themselves pretty well. And it's fun to see the tomatoes growing and then getting redder before you can harvest them. They're good snacks. So that might be a good start, or maybe there might be some herbs that you'd like to add into your cooking. So easy ones are like basil or parsley, coriander. All those things grow pretty well in a pot or in the ground outside of a home. Um, Generally with the garden, if you've got a big land, don't plant it at the end of the land. Plant it close. That way it's more accessible. You'll use it more often. Things like watering and whatnot. You can easily get access to water from your hose at home and things like that. So think about things that are really practical for you. Maybe you've got deer or other things in the area. There's 1,001 techniques to deal with them. They're not all effective, but it's a process of trial and error. What works best for you. So you start simple. A lot of people, they kind of think too big, and then they kind of get overwhelmed with it, with weeding or with harvesting, that kinds of stuff. So really start simple. Start with a small garden if it's your first time, and then grow as you go. Talk with your neighbors or others in your community. Everyone's got maybe an anecdote or an experience that they'd like to share. So it's a point of conversation and a way to kind of tap into the collective intelligence in some ways, because gardening was a part of everyone's lives 30, 40, 50 years ago.
Yeah.
So we lost it for a while. We got too convenient, I think, with grocery stores and whatnot. But now I think we're coming back and we're realizing the value of it in a lot of different ways. And even this summer, like Baie des Chaleurs, which is a network of local farmers that sell organic food, they saw their sales increase by 5, 6, 7%, or 6, 7 times. Sorry, this spring, because people were that much more aware of buying locally, buying fresh, and supporting those local farmers. So one of the things that they sold a lot of was seeds. And so I think that there's going to be a wave of interest and support as well around people developing their own gardens or participating in a local community garden, which exists in just about every municipality in the Bay. So there's lots of support out there for people who are interested, and it might start here, the interest, but then after that, Mary, myself, or others would be happy to kind of connect you with people in your area that would be happy to share their experience, tools, other kinds of stuff like that.
Yeah, because there is so much information. It's only when you start to talk about it that you learn. And I mean, I've been gardening since I've been a child, but I'm still always learning. And that's the great thing about gardening. We're always learning. And Greg, you mentioned garlic at one point and basil, but those are plants that, like for garlic, we grow the garlic, we keep some bulbs, we put it back in the ground, and it's easy. Garlic is very little work. There's very little work involved. My basil keeps coming up every year, so I really have nothing to do except kind of try to keep it trimmed back and give people plant parts of it because it just grows. So, and I think gardeners are the kind of people that are really willing to help other gardeners because we know how much we enjoy it and how much value we get out of it, and that we want others to enjoy. And so you were saying about there's more people buying the seeds, there's more supporting community gardens, et cetera, et cetera. And I think more individuals now, and maybe you know more about that, are looking to start small home gardens.
Yeah, I think of all ages too.
Yes.
From young families like myself to people who are middle-aged or elders. I think everybody has taken an interest in things like food security and organic gardening and those kinds of things. We've heard about it in the media or from our friends and neighbors, and I think that this COVID situation is give us a bit of a kick in the butt in a couple of different ways around that, because we've got maybe more time on our hands. We're kind of stuck at home and we're thinking about the sunny spot in the backyard that could become a garden. So finally, let's take the opportunity now while I've got that time to do that. Or maybe they're worried about going to the grocery store every time that they want some fresh carrots or tomatoes, and growing it in your own garden. Well, it saves you a couple of visits to the grocery stores for that. So everyone's got their own reason, I think, to step up to the plate. But it's one of those actions that we can take control of ourselves in a lot of ways. And food, we eat it 3 times a day, every day of the week, and it's something that I think that we realized that, hey, if I can do that myself and it's not that hard,
Yeah.
then it's something that I can take pride in. And for all the good reasons that you and I have mentioned, I think
Yeah.
that people can find something in there that calls to them and that they want to move forward with it. So, mhm.
Greg, do you got one short little garden story that you want to share?
Yeah, I thought about that, and well, it's funny. There's always the question of pests, right? For some garden, it's
Oh, yeah.
potato bugs
Yeah.
or deer that get into the garden and eat your carrot tops or whatever. In my area, I've just about every year there's a problem around groundhogs, and so they're pesky little guys. They get up really early so that they can start nibbling on your veggies before you even get out of bed. So I started noticing that happening, and found a cage from a friend. And so, sure enough, we trapped a groundhog, and I was like, okay, I'm going to drive that a good 10 kilometers away, drop it off in the middle of the woods. The next day, another groundhog shows up. I do the same. I drive it even further this time, thinking, "Oh, that guy, he's really, he's venturous. He found my garden again." At the third day in a row, still another groundhog came. So I was like, Where are they all coming from, right?" So it got pretty crazy there that summer. I was pretty worn out from having to like set the cage and drive it and worry about it. So, anyways, I didn't give up. I finally solved the problem after a while. It must have been a family or
You
something,
must
but
have been a family.
yeah. So I got rid of them, but it's an adventure, right? There's always unexpected aspects, and you got to laugh at yourself in the situation. It might be frustrating at the time, but then you look back at it after a few months, and you realize it was quite the adventure that you went through to look after your garden.
That's it. We do so much for it because it becomes like we protect it by all means. You know what I mean? So yeah, gardening has a lot of stories. It's just like fishing stories. We have gardening stories as well.
Yeah.
Greg, I know that you're very, very busy, and I really, really enjoy this conversation. I think, like people listening to you are going to maybe want to pick up a bag of dirt and maybe start to grow something. And I know there's resources out there, like you were saying, a lot of there's community groups, there's community gardens, and like for anybody who wanted to start a tomato plant, there's greenhouses now opened if you haven't started them yourselves. What are your last words that you would like to kind of leave people with?
Well, just take a serious think about it if you haven't already, because it is something that you could do. Maybe even you got a neighbor that has a garden started, and you can ask to join in a little corner of that. Or it could be just you haven't got the time, you haven't got the energy, but you just want to buy local because you think it's important. Everybody's got their way that they can contribute to that food security, support local farmers, or do it themselves. And I just encourage people to think about their own needs and about their own abilities and interests and go from there. And don't be afraid to try something, even if your garden gets invaded with weeds and you throw up your arms. At least you tried and you learned, and next year you'll do it a little bit different. And so it's an opportunity to just get a new experience. So and people that are doing it already, go gangbusters. This is your summer to really take it up a notch. So everyone's got their own approach to it. Yeah.
Great. Thank you so much for joining us. And I really appreciate, I know others will appreciate it as well. And maybe, Greg, I'm going to put myself right out there. I want to say maybe someday you'll come back and we'll have another chat about another aspect of gardening.
I'd be happy to be there. Thanks for the invitation, okay. Mary.
Thank you so much. And for everyone out there, I'm really glad that you joined us today. And I hope to see you again on our next chat. And until then, let's find ways to look after each other here on the Gaspe Coast. Let's support each other in all that we're trying to do to live better here on the coast. So until next time, bye for now.